we're going to start this week off on a little bit of a somber note before we jump into the movie. We were just informed, or we just learned, I guess, yesterday, that Jim Hendrix had passed away on St. Patrick's Day, which would have been a week ago yesterday. I personally don't remember Jim Hendrix from my childhood, but after I did some looking into it, it turns out that it seems like he affected a lot of people's childhoods, including yours, Mark.
Oh yeah, he was kind of a big part of a couple of maybe 2 or 3 years for me. I remember, we talk about Svengoolie on here all the time, and Svengoolie was on in the late 70s, early 80s, and I remember being really little, watching him on Saturday nights, the old monster movies and all that, and then obviously he returned in the mid 90s, and he's been going strong ever since. But no other horror host, even Elvira, I never really saw her show back in the day, and so, but it was Commander USA from the USA Network that I do recall very well. I think it was Saturday or Sunday afternoon, my brother and I used to watch his show, and he would play more of the kind of the cheese horror films of like the, probably the 70s and 80s, probably dipped into the 60s too. But I remember him always, the first time I saw Chud was on Commander USA, and it's sad because he kind of disappeared, and nobody's really heard from him, and some of the fans were looking for him, and I've dug around trying to find where he's at, and there's I think maybe a Facebook page or something that a fan created page, but in terms of where he's been, we're talking about James Hendricks, the guy who played the commander. Yeah, he's been nowhere to be found.
Yeah, and I did a little bit of digging earlier, and I didn't find anything really. Like you'd said, I'd found the YouTube video that you had sent me yesterday, and then that one post that I saw on Facebook, which leads to the Commander USA Facebook page, which there's only 2 posts on that page, which is kind of odd. One was from when it first started way back in 2010, and then there was another one in, I think, from 2013 or 2015 that just said, "Hey, thanks for the support, guys." And it's like you said, it's a fan page, and I was actually kind of surprised that there wasn't a post recently on it. And who knows, maybe that guy had no idea yet that Commander USA had passed away.
Could be.
Yeah, I couldn't find any. I mean, I'll admit I didn't do some real investigative work and did some real digging on it. But I did a couple quick searches and couldn't find any what he passed away from, or if he'd been sick for a while, or I don't know. He could have been a heart attack. I don't have any idea.
Yeah, the only thing I found. Well, first thing was I think I saw it on Facebook or somewhere else. Somebody posted something about it, and then I was like, "Oh my gosh, really?" Kind of. So I tried looking around on Google, and there was really nothing. But then I found on the classic horror film board, somebody posted. I guess a guy named Henry Kaplan. He's a friend of James Hendricks. Posted on somebody's Facebook page. He wrote, "The great Jim Hendricks, a.k.a. Commander USA, has passed away. Fitting that he passed on St. Patty's Day. I was lucky enough to work with Jimmy for 7 years in the New York production of Tony and Tina's Wedding." So I guess he was still working. "I know you wrote for Jimmy, and I thought you might like to know." So apparently he was writing on somebody's webpage who wrote some of his, maybe his jokes or something. And then the other thing I read, and this kind of put all together here, is having seen no other mention on the web, I asked if this had been confirmed, and Kaplan replied. So this guy Kaplan, Henry Kaplan, a friend of Jimi Hendrix, said, "Hi, Terry. According to Jimmy's wishes, he requested no formal obituary, or I would have forwarded one. Sadly, the news is true." So he did. He knew he was going to pass, and he did pass, and I guess he wanted to kind of do it quietly.
All right. Well, rest in peace, Commander USA, here's to
Yeah.
you.
Keep your nose in the wind and your tail to yourself.
Well, we'll go ahead and move into this week's topic, which actually it's kind of surprised me because this was a topic that Mark suggested. And this is one of those films that I don't think we had any interest in when we were children at all. I don't remember ever seeing this when we were kids. I don't remember ever seeing this one until I was probably, I'd say, in my 20s.
But you didn't know about it, right? Back when we were kids, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember seeing some of the stuff like in Fangoria and all that good stuff. But I don't think I really got into it until I really got into the whole Charles Band and Full Moon stuff. Even though I've said before how I kind of had that in my teens, but I didn't really get into that until I was really my 20s, I don't think. But we are talking about the 1985 classic Empire Pictures Re-Animator.
Now this is probably I don't know what you think about this way of describing this film, but you know how we use the whole beer and popcorn reference a lot? A beer and popcorn movie, okay, so like if you were to go rent Ghoulies 2 and watch that would probably be like Milwaukee's Best and some, great value Walmart popcorn. Okay. The Re-Animator, you would probably get like a craft beer and some like homemade or some freshly made, a gourmet popcorn that you can only get online. And so I would still categorize it as a beer and popcorn movie, but a higher quality beer and popcorn movie. It's a lot of fun.
I'm going to throw in one thing because I know we'll get to this a little bit. It's a beer and popcorn and Kleenex movie.
Yeah, yes it is. And that's kind of funny because I forgot about that. My intro to this film was, again, got to go back to the old 80s video stores and scouring the shelves and looking for movies. And, the Re-Animator was always there. I think like every video store you went to, it was like a staple. And so it never really interested me because, again, I was always a slasher guy. So I was always looking at more like the Friday the 13th movies and all that stuff. But my uncle actually introduced me to this film. And if I am correct, I do believe he had it on Laserdisc.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah. So I remember watching it, and I don't remember it. Like, he was really into it. He thought it was, like, it was just great. And I remember him bringing it over or something. He used to bring his, like, before we had a VCR, he would bring his VCR, and then he brought his Laserdisc thing over, and so we would and he was just totally into it. He wasn't like a horror guy or anything, but he just thought it was great. So, but then, so I actually didn't revisit it for myself until probably maybe 5-6 years ago. Did I see it like all the way through? I think, and it was one of those movies where if you watched a horror documentary or something, they always showed parts of it. So it was like always you kind of knew about it, but it took a while for me to really go back and watch it.
I remember being early 20s, and we were living, in this little college town. There was a couple of video stores in town. The job I was doing at the time, it was kind of weird. Because I worked at a fast food restaurant, so I had lots of free time, even though I worked all the time. Because I would work like 7 days a week for like a 2 or 3 week stretch sometimes, but maybe I'd only work like 4 or 6 hours a day, so I had plenty of time. So I would always scrounge the video store, and I remember going through this period of time where I would kind of have this list of movies that I had never seen, but I always heard about, and I got to watch these movies, and so I'd always have like a couple of movies in mind when I'd go to the video store. And I remember I don't remember exactly when it was, but I remember Re-Animator was one of those movies. You know, you'd always had seen it and stuff. And I think at that time, Beyond Re-Animator, I think, was coming out or had come out a couple of years before that or something along those lines. I remember like, oh yeah, Re-Animator. So I watched it. And I remember the first time I saw it, like I thought it was cool, but I wasn't like overly impressed with it. As time went by and I kind of got into this whole Charles Band thing and then, you know, realized that it was a Empire Pictures movie. And then it also has this, you know, it's based off of a H.P. Lovecraft book, kind of, which Empire did a few of those. And then, you know, that stuff's all kind of intertwined with Charles Band. And now when I revisit it, like you had said, I feel that this is completely a beer and popcorn movie. It's one of those to where it's right on the border of that, to where, like you had said, it's like a gourmet popcorn and craft beer movie, to where, you know, it's almost outside of that category, but not quite. And there's so much of this movie that is enjoyable. And I don't know if you're this way with some movies, but there are certain movies that I'll watch by myself, and I'll find myself not cheering the movie on, but there are certain things, like, you know, there's certain scenes that you're anticipating happening, and so when those do happen, you're like, yeah! Or, you know, you, like, laugh out loud, or, you know...
Yeah.
You're like, oh, there it is! That's perfect! You know, that kind of stuff. Even though you've seen the movie, I mean, like I said, I didn't see this movie until I was in my 20s at some point. I've probably seen it 50 times since then. It's just one of these movies that, you know, every once in a while I just get the urge to watch and be like, oh, I'm going to watch Re-Animator tonight. So throw it on.
Yeah, it's definitely a go-to movie.
Yeah, and it was so funny when we were picking movies for this episode, and you had picked a movie that we're going to do later this year. I was getting ready to throw out some suggestions, and you're like, Re-Animator. And at first I was kind of like, that's a weird movie for Mark to suggest. Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, let's do it. You know, just because, I mean, it was, and I don't mean that like in any disrespectful way for our listeners, but what I mean by that is because there are certain movies that have been around, you know, like from the 80s that, you know, usually when we suggest those movies that weren't childhood movies of ours, it usually comes out of something else. You know, we'll be talking about something, you know, it'd be, oh yeah, just like in such and such, and they're like, oh, hey, we should do that movie. Okay, yeah, let's do that one. So it was kind of, you know, it's one of those things. The best way to describe this is if like you're almost like you have an old friend, and then, you know, come to find out 30 years in a relationship, oh, hey, you like that too? That's cool.
Right. Yeah, I've always... it's one of those films that it's just a fun go-to movie. It's like one you can kind of pop in anytime. That's why, again, goes back to the whole beer and popcorn thing where it's like, you know, you're looking around, well, what can I watch today? Oh, Re-Animator. Oh, cool. I'll watch that. Yeah, but this one, it goes up a level in terms of... I guess here's my ratings for films. Okay, so then there's the masterpiece films. There's the, you know, the high-end, high-quality films that you'll actually go out to the theater to watch, even though you own them on Blu-ray, and that would be obviously like Halloween, you know. Then there's the, you know, the films that you watch every year because they're fun and they're great and they're your classics and you grew up with them and they're wonderful, and that's like the Friday the 13th movies and the you know, Nightmare on Elm Street movies, and then the Texas Chainsaw and all that stuff. And then there's the movies that we go into, like the beer and popcorn movies, you know, like the Re-Animator, and then, you know, or Fright Night, or Tourist Trap, or, you know, those kind of films. And then there's the lower end beer and popcorn movies, like, you know, the Ghoulies franchise, or Critters, or you know, that kind of thing. And then there's the movies that like you watch while you're taking a shit on your phone, like Zombies.
Old Zombies needs to start paying us some royalties, man, because that movie comes up almost every episode anymore.
Right.
It gets more publicity on this than anything else. So just real quick, if you don't know the kind of the storyline to Re-Animator, I'm not going to go into as much detail as we typically go to with some of these on this show. But like I said before, this is loosely based off of an H.P. Lovecraft novella, Herbert West Re-Animator, which Herbert West is the main character in this movie, played by the one and only Jeffrey Combs.
He was great in this role, too.
Yeah, he is really great in this role. But basically what it is you have this, he's like a student, is the way he's portrayed in this, and he was learning under some like world famous scientist in Germany, I believe, and then some stuff happened, and he flashed forward to this stateside university, and he is all of a sudden at this stateside university as this new like star student, and he's being introduced around campus as he used to work for this German scientist, and everybody's like, "Ooh, that's cool." Basically, what ends up happening is he has a serum that will reanimate dead objects, and so he is doing some testing with that, and he gets involved with a couple other students at this university. Another star student is his roommate, and then he actually ends up getting involved in this little web of activity that happens with the daughter of the dean of the school. And then very quickly, kind of all hell breaks loose with bringing dead bodies back to life. But like you had said, it's one of these movies that you just, you put in, it's completely enjoyable from the time that it starts to the time it's over. It's just, I don't know what it is about it, but I mean, you have Jeffrey Combs, who plays Herbert West. And then the other very notable character in this movie, or actress in this movie, is Barbara Crampton.
Oh, yes.
Who plays, what's her character's name? Megan, I think, was the name of her character in this story. If you do not know who Barbara Crampton is, you guys need to do yourselves a favor and look her up, because she is phenomenal.
She really made this film.
And she was a decent actress, and she was in a bunch of stuff in the 80s, and I think I know she's still working today, but she is absolutely great in this movie. And there is a sequence in this movie, which we've talked about before on previous episodes, where you have the unnecessary nudity in movies. But there is a sequence in this movie. There's a couple of different times in this movie where you get to see her nude. But there is this one particular sequence where she is naked in this laboratory for no reason at all. But it is probably, I would say, my favorite nude scene in a horror movie.
You know what? I probably have to agree with you. It really is that good.
Yeah.
I can't think of one that really is better, that's for sure.
It's just one of those scenes where you're watching and you're like, wow.
No. Strangely enough, she's in Chopping Mall.
Yeah.
I had no... Interesting. It's just so a year later she went and did that.
And then that same year later, she was in Playboy as well.
Was she really?
Yeah, in December of 1986.
Oh, she was in Puppet Master too.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, her and Jeffrey Combs were kind of, for a while there, they were kind of staples for Charles Band.
Oh, okay.
Even though Charles Band didn't direct this movie, Stuart Gordon directed Re-Animator. Richard Band, Charles's brother, actually did the soundtrack or the score for this movie.
Interesting.
But it was distributed by Empire, which was a Charles Band company. Which, if you go back a couple episodes, you listen to the Charles Band episode. But Empire Films, kind of went through. Started as Wizard, and then moved into Empire, or started as Empire, moved into Wizard, and then, ends up, now it's Full Moon. But Jeffrey Combs and Barbara Crampton have done a couple of different projects with Charles Band over the years, which is kind of cool. And the very first flashback weekend that I went to, they were all there, and I regret to this day not meeting Barbara Crampton.
So apparently there's an X rating of this film too. I wonder if that had more Barbara.
Oof.
That'd be interesting.
I don't know if I could handle that, Barbara.
Other than the Barbara scene, what kind of holds up like when you think back to this?
Oh, I would have to say, other than that, my favorite thing with this whole movie is just the kind of over-the-top... It's not really over-the-top, but the gore that's in it. Because there are a few scenes in this movie where you're like, ugh! But then some of it, you're like, oh, that's kind of cool. There's the one scene where Herbert West and the other guy they go into the morgue area, and they're gonna, they're testing out the serum, and they bring the one like kind of muscular guy back to life, and then he's attacking him. Herbert West takes the skull saw and like cuts a hole through the guy's chest, and like his hand goes through there. You're like, ah. But then you have the one professor gets his head chopped off with the shovel. That scene is always like, it's one of those scenes where you're like, ugh, but at the same time you're like, oh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, actually, I love the Dr. Hill scenes with him where he's got like the plastic head on. He's trying to sneak into the morgue with that.
Oh yeah.
I love that. I just, for some reason, it's kind of funny too, because this kind of goes to show, like, yeah, I saw this way back as a kid on Laserdisc. My uncle brought it over, and for whatever reason, before I went and revisited this film, I always thought that the professor with the headless guy with where he carried around his head in the pan, I always thought he was like this, like the sidekick to the main character. And then when I saw the film all the way through, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I didn't realize that he was not that. But for some reason in my head, I always pictured him as that. I think this really falls into the horror classics, because this is really kind of sums up what, some of the fun that you can have in a horror film. And I give it a big time thumbs up.
Oh yeah. It to me, it's almost kind of surprising with the day and age that we live in now, where everything is getting remade. I find it kind of odd that Re-Animator has never been remade. And I didn't do too much digging into this, so I don't know if there was talk of remaking it at some point. Because this movie, even though the 1985 movie is, in my opinion, is perfect with the way that it is, I don't think you could beat it in any way, shape, or form. There's no way that you could ever replace Jeffrey Combs or Barbara Crampton in this movie.
No.
But I'm surprised that, because this story is one of those stories that I could see, somebody going, oh, we should remake that. That would be great.
Yeah, I'm surprised it hasn't been remade either, because, yeah, this is a top-of-the-line horror for sure.
It really is. And when you think of some of the other movies of the time, because this came out in 85, so this would have been, a year after A Nightmare on Elm Street came out. This movie being a horror movie coming out in the mid-80s, and not being a slasher movie at all, I guess some people would probably kind of consider it maybe a bit of a zombie movie. But it's, I just can't imagine the kind of risk that they were taking at that time to, like, hey, let's make this movie that has nothing to do with slashers at all.
In 1985 is like, that's kind of the slasher heyday. That's where, the middle of the Friday the 13th franchise And yeah, I mean that was the in vogue thing, was the slasher film. So this kind of was a detour.
And the other thing you said there, like in the middle of the Friday the 13th franchise, so 85 would have been right in that peak where stuff was still good. So,
Yeah.
I mean, Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2 was just coming out. What were we at? We were at Friday 5, I guess.
Friday 5, yep.
I guess then that you could kind of make an argument with that one. But, coming off of Friday 4, though, the year before, fantastic movie. Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2. So right at the kind of the peak of the slasher craze, because this would have been 1985. Halloween 4 hadn't come out yet.
Nope.
Empire decides, hey, let's make this supernatural undead movie, and it's great. Yeah, I give it a thumbs up as well.
Excellent film, and excellent classic video store rental movie. And this is kind of, when you think about like, walking into a video store on a Friday, Saturday night back in the day, and you don't know what to see, and you're kind of looking around the horror section. This is definitely one that you would have picked up back then.
For sure. All right. Well, that wraps it up, guys, I think. So we'll be back next week with something different.
Keep your nose in the wind and your tail to yourself.